This week's episode of the ClearOut was recorded on the 7th of August 2024 at home in Wicklow, and it is an episode about new spaces. It's an episode about mojo. It is an episode about coping with life's challenges. It is an episode about the natural state of you. And it is an episode that concludes with wisdom from an old karate practitioner. Great wisdoms that I share and contextualize in terms of how we might approach those challenges many of us, if not all of us, face on a regular basis on our daily quest to survive, our daily quest to thrive. So that is going to be then very much a wellness episode, which is appropriate for a podcast with the subtitle Wellness with Attitude. I hope you enjoy what you hear. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear and you're listening to the ClearOut. You're very welcome. It's lovely to have you with me, and thank you for choosing this podcast over the very many others that are out there that you could have chosen. So it's great to have you with me. And if you are someone who is a regular listener, you'll know that last week, for the first time in over 3 years since the podcast launched, I didn't record an episode because I was up to my eyeballs in boxes, stacks, piles, things to be shifted, moved, cleaned, rearranged, picked up, put down, taken in, taken out, put into cars, taken out of cars, and there simply wasn't the space, the headspace, the mental energy that is required to sit down and do this thing. So I accepted defeat and said, no, it can't be done. So that means that I am coming to you not from #blessed. The previous episode, which was dedicated to bad movies, particularly inspired by Kevin Costner's turgid Horizon, his epic western that came out stillborn, it seems. That was the last episode recorded at #blessed, which has been the home of the ClearOut podcast until now. So we are in our new abode, not that far from where we used to be. So that was a blessing, and I'm still trying to decide what to call our new place for the purposes of the podcast. So I offered #vibes to my daughter. She said that's cringe, so that was rejected immediately. And I mean, vibes can be interpreted negatively as well as positively. So I was a bit lukewarm on that. I think I also suggest hashtag harmony. Again, cringe. And again, what I'm trying to suggest here, if you're not picking up what I'm laying down, I'm trying to suggest that we've moved into another nice place, smaller than where we were, but really, really lovely. And so the other option I'm playing with is #secret garden. That might have been the cringiest of all, but I'm quite attached to that. So that might be, we might put that in a holding position until I come up with something better. And the reason the reason I'm suggesting hashtag secret garden might be a good name for, again, for the purpose of identifying our place on the podcast only, is that we enter through bushes, through a little fence in amongst trees, and there's a little walkway, and we emerge into a very mature, lush garden, and that is where our new home is. So yeah, I mean, what can I say? The hashtag I'm illiterate today. The hashtag blessed mojo has followed us to our new place, and I don't know what to say. My wife and I have always been very lucky in terms of places we found to live. In other areas of our life, less lucky, but touch wood, our luck in this particular department has held over the duration of our relationship. So maybe that's one incentive to stay together, to keep this marriage intact, is it may guarantee us nice places to live. Now, I don't know if you just heard in the background the sound of a car driving by, because where I'm recording is very close to the road. I'm separated by a few bushes and trees, so I'm going to have to experiment with this to see whether this space works or not. Also, just before I pressed record, my neighbour on the other side of the garden fired up his lawnmower. I was like, really? Doesn't he know I'm recording my podcast? So that's this little outside studio. It's a little shed that we're going to use as our sort of office studio space. A little bit of work is going to have to be done to maybe make it a little bit more soundproof and user friendly for recording purposes. So we'll see what happens. So there you go. So for now, I'm coming from hashtag secret garden. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't like that now that I've said it again. We'll see. It may just be a movable feast. I'm looking at the window of the shed, the recording studio, at prayer flags, Tibetan prayer flags that my wife has put up in the garden. So that's nice straight away, and more luscious growth. And I'm also looking at cobwebs because the windows need a clean. So there's work to be done in this space, as I've already said. Anyway, where to pick things up? Moving is exhausting. Everyone we bumped into over the last week and a half everyone said the same thing. Oh, it's moving house, one of the most stressful things, one of the 3 most stressful things anyone can ever do. I think public speaking is one. That's very individual though. What else is one? Oh, I don't know. There's a third one that's on that list as well. Some massive event like weddings or something like that. Anyway, we were lucky because we didn't have that far to move. I don't know if I would consider it stressful. It definitely exhausting, definitely just a grind, and it was 7 or 8 days straight of extracting ourselves from hashtag blessed and moving here, and the cleaning and getting rid of things we no longer needed or could use in our new space, and it just never seemed to end. And even now there are some remaining boxes that have to be squirreled away somewhere, so we may have to invest in another little storage space. Oh, that's a loud one going by. Did you hear that one? That's rumbling. I can feel that in the seat of my pants. Anyway, look, nice for us to have found a great place to live in the middle of historically appalling housing crisis in Ireland. And again, it's, you know, it's who you know, it's connections, it's people knowing you and responding to something that you're giving off in a positive way, and then nice things move in your direction. I'm a big believer in that. Doesn't always work, but it won't stop me. It won't stop me trying. So, yeah, in a way, I suppose my head today, as I sit down to record, is in that sort of new beginnings mindset, the new beginnings headspace, and that is maybe a bit of a not, I don't want to say a trap, but maybe a little bit of a delusion we admit entry to in our lives, because I think there's a sort of a perpetual craving for something new, a perpetual craving for a restart, for a refresh. And I suppose there are things you can do. There are superficial things you can do to bring about that sense or that perception. And you know, and maybe superficial is the wrong word to use. I mean, you know, start a new job, start a new relationship, start a new marriage, you know, adopt some children. These are not superficial changes, and they can feel like that's a new start. But for a long time, I feel like I've believed, or I've understood, that it doesn't matter what external changes you make, the internal sense or the internal perception, the internal battleground is always with you. And ultimately my belief remains that it, you know, true change happens within, not without. And the hard work is done internally, not externally. Now, external habits can enhance or facilitate or structurally support that internal change if change is sought. And you know, that's, again, you know, that opens up another line of inquiry or another line of reflection around the idea of acceptance. Because if you're constantly seeking change, it doesn't sound like there's much in the way of acceptance. You know, the scab that you can't leave alone. You are the scab. You are the wound. You are the wound that you are constantly not allowing to heal, and you're constantly itching and picking at that scab, and therefore the wound is forever exposed. I don't know how well that analogy works, because it's overly gratuitous and perhaps negative or defeatist, or I don't know, despondent in some way. So maybe that's too vivid an image to work with, but nonetheless, I do believe that we are constantly in need of attention, and that doesn't necessarily have to become self-absorption or narcissism, or self-obsession. It's in my opinion a cultivation of a deep listening. I've spoken about this idea before. A deep listening that is in service of knowing yourself and understanding yourself and being aware of what's right for you. It's a constant attentiveness to the fine tuning of your being that allows you to function most effectively and to make the best decisions for yourself and for others. I think sometimes when we encounter wellness rhetoric, for want of a better phrase, or self-care rhetoric, I think it's easy to come across a sort of an overly self-interested thrust with a lot of wellness advocacy and a lot of wellness sound bites, which I hope that the accumulative effect of, the blog that I started in 2013 that became this podcast, I hope the accumulative effect isn't of sort of an advocacy for relentless navel gazing and sort of a twisted or warped or perverted misunderstanding of the examined life, because that's not what I'm interested in, and it's not what I value, and it's not what I'm trying to speak about or be in service of in the work I do on myself and in this sort of extension of that work or that thoughtfulness or that reflectiveness that I try to bring to the podcast on a fairly regular basis. Everything that I've done here is really about trying to make a positive contribution to, if I say the world, that's too grandiose. But to make a positive contribution to whoever stumbles across this, whoever chooses to listen, or whoever goes and reads one of the pieces I wrote on the blog, my hope always would be that you finish listening or you finish reading and you go, that actually was something good, something healthy, something sort of unthreateningly nutritious or nourishing, without being po-faced, without being sanctimonious, and without ever claiming that I know best. This is simply me going, this is how I think about things, and I mean, my sense is that it's that I'm far from alone, that other people think about these things, but maybe they just don't put it out there or have the opportunity to speak about it or share that way of thinking. In no way am I trying to position myself as exceptional or expert. I mean, I'm expert at doing this. I'm expert at sitting down in front of this microphone and freestyling for approximately an hour once a week and achieving some semblance of coherence that I suppose is a skill of itself. Anyway, look, sorry, that's all a bit tangential. What I was thinking before I came out here to press record was I was thinking of mojo. What does mojo even mean? Mojo, energy. Mojo to me always suggests an energy that moves, an energy that shifts, an energy that is about actualization, an energy that is positive, proactive, outward moving, outward looking, very dynamic, very focused, uninhibited, and getting one into a certain zone of fulfilled functionality. And so good mojo and bad mojo, no mojo. I think you can, work the idea pretty simply and pretty effectively. So, my mojo has been all over the place this year. I've spoken about this very explicitly when my mojo was in the toilet, and definitely this sort of transition into a new home is, some things are really good about it, and it raises other things that are confronting. And I was trying to get my head around this and go, like, what is it? Like, what is it about certain challenges that can be so destructive to one's sense of calm and one's sense of rightness? Now, again, I use the word rightness, or the concept of rightness, not in terms of I'm right and you're wrong, not in that sort of point scoring way, but more in the sense of being in a state of rightness, in a state of balance, in a state of naturalness, that sense of rightness. So, trees that have their roots in the ground and their branches pointing towards the sky, that tree is in a state of rightness. And if we turn that tree upside down, that is no longer the case. That is a state of unnature and unnaturalness that challenges us. So when I think about wellness, when I think about self-care, I think about the natural state one should be in, or wants to be in, or the state that allows one to be most natural. And again, when speaking in general terms, applying the broad brush strokes, I talk about the median. I talk about the sort of the average sort of mid-spectrum experience. Now, I don't know if that's a useful reference point, because you could obviously argue, oh yeah, but for some people their natural state is to be a homicidal maniac. Is that natural though, really? We can get into that sort of pedantic stuff, and as ever, with point scorers and Jesuits and pedants, there's a lot of disingenuous arguing just for the sake of point scoring. I sort of detest that. I hate it with a passion. I just go, really? Is this the best use of your time? And obviously, in the world of online trolls, that is very much part of their weaponry as well. Point scoring, tearing people down. And I just go, okay, this is really, it's not contributing anything positive. And I just have no tolerance for it. I've no tolerance for it. So my general thinking is, have a look at your life, and are things in balance? And have you created the situation, or have you put things in place that allow you to be your untrammeled self. I mean, this goes back to, a theory I kind of mused on many years ago, 15, 16 years ago, where, and again, I may have laid this out here before on the podcast or in one of my blog posts, but the idea that, so much of life is about overcoming obstacles. So much of life is about learning how to deal with forces of resistance. And I mean forces that resist you. I'm not saying that your happiest self is the irresistible you, but it's actually, but it's not far from that idea. And it's like, what would you be like if nothing ever got in your way? Now, would that make you a terrible person? Would that be the road of the spoiled child who never hears no? Again, let's throw in a reasonable frame of reasonable behaviour and reasonable guidance, whatever that means. Just basic structures of behaviour that takes other people's lives, feelings, rights into consideration. And that is, if not baked in, that it is slowly taught, and that's part of your package, that your path doesn't involve you dumping on other people. But what would your path look like if you just were allowed to follow your natural inclination, your natural tendency, your natural leaning? Where would you end up? I don't know who that happens for. And that isn't, I'm not advocating that. I'm just, it's just a sort of it's a hypothetical. It's a mind game to go, well, how would I be if I didn't have various obstacles, traumas, forces of resistance, blockages, closed doors, lowered ceilings, lowered bars of expectation? If all of that wasn't there, where would I be as a person? Where would you be as a person? What would that version of you look like? Would you just be thriving in a very simple way? Would you be thriving in a very unfussy, quiet way? I guess one natural endpoint of that thought experiment is some people would be megalomaniacs and they just want to take over the world. I don't know. But I think another natural endpoint would be somebody who would just be extremely happy living a very invisible life and happily fulfilled doing something completely innocuous and unremarkable. And I think that the principle located in that end of the thought experiment is very appealing to me, because I think there is a rightness to that. Now, things obviously get complicated when you look at the reality of life and the reality of what most of us face in our lives, which are those things: obstacles and traumas and various sources of conflict, various sources of rejection and shutdown, various sources of disappointment, of personal crisis. And all of that has to be negotiated. All of that has to be lived with. All of that has to be accommodated in some way that allows us to continue. But of course, all of those experiences shape us. They shape our personality. They shape how we choose to live. They shape how we respond and react. And they can be enormous shaping factors that deflect us from that hypothetical path of no obstacle. The path of no obstacle. The path of no obstacles. The path of no resistance. And I'm not talking about the path of least resistance. That's a different thing. And that's available to us at all times. The path of least resistance. I'm talking about the path of no resistance. This idealized path, which may have given us the truest version of ourselves. So I'm not just talking about some fantasy. I'm not just talking about some la la land notion of, yeah, but what if I got to do everything I wanted and I'd just be amazing? That's not what I'm saying. I am at heart, I'm trying to talk about the truest version of yourself. Now, I'm not sure if that's a completely naive notion or a completely naive concept. I don't believe it is. But that said, what this comes back to then is, do you know what that is? Do you know what that would look like? And that bumps us back into the original hypothetical. Well, what would you be like? What would your truest self be like? Had you not had these 270 experiences over the last 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years? What would you be like without those burdens? And the thing is, I suppose what I really think is, if you're doing the work on yourself, that your true self can still emerge and thrive in spite of, or even because of, the realities of life that we all experience. The painful experiences, the challenges, the traumas, the disappointments, the hurts, the consuming anger, resentment, bitterness, cynicism, all of those things, all of these things that conspire to deflect us from our path, to there's another bum rumbler passing by. All these things that conspire to make us turn inwards, and to make us fold, and to make us crumple. All of those things are ultimately, if I say tests, things start to veer into maybe divine territory. I don't believe in that. And yet, so much of how we understand ourselves is based on our own perspective, our own viewpoint. What matrix or template or rubric we use to understand the world we live in, to understand our own path and our own trials and tribulations. So we have choices. We have choices. Or we have a choice. Do we allow ourselves to simply be buffeted about on the ocean of life, and just constantly move in the direction life pushes us? Because that's a path of least resistance. But there are other choices. There are other choices. You can you can occasionally take on the storms. I'm not saying I'm not trying to put it into some macho frame, but I think in a way, what I'm trying to say is it's not, maybe the choice is between passivity and action, and I'm not a fan of passivity. I'm not a fan of that choice. I prefer to act. I prefer to go, okay, what is the best choice for me here? What is the best use of what I've got at this moment with the information I have? And then, allowing other things to come into that calculation, in terms of mental and emotional resources, other people to consider in that mix. And I suppose, on some level, that's a sort of what's it going to cost me to do this? What are the benefits? Where is it going to get me? And all that kind of thing. Cost benefit analysis, I suppose. I've been hit with that concept by a friend who may or may not be listening. Hey, friend. That kind of language leaves me a bit cold. But I suppose I come back to what way are you going to take this on? What way are you going to take life on? The Buddhists believe that life is suffering. I think I'm representing the Buddhist position in very simple terms there. Life is suffering. Life is constant suffering. Life is endless suffering. Life is pain. But I don't believe that means you can't be happy. I don't believe that means you have to but I don't believe that means the focus has to be on the suffering. The focus has to be on the pain. I think the understanding is that you adopt a position of acceptance of suffering and acceptance of pain while you carry on. And within the carrying on, there's opportunity for other experiences that balance the suffering, that counter the suffering, that alleviate or mitigate the suffering. And maybe there's a tendency out there that we either go full on into the dark side of everything is suffering and life is miserable and I hate it and there's no hope, or we go way the other direction into everything's amazing and life is wonderful all the time. And every moment is to be celebrated, and a million Instagram posts will follow. I mean, neither of those look like good choices to me. And of course, Buddhism is it's the middle way. So I think to come back to this idea of what we face and what we have to handle. And I was just talking about this the other morning when I was teaching, having a sort of a qigong / tai chi session with a friend, student, and I was just reflecting on the importance of putting things down, reflecting on the strength of that idea, and not just the strength of that idea, but the necessity to put things down. And I don't mean put things down in writing or on tape, so to speak. I mean to put down what we're carrying. So I think it's a good question to ask yourself what you are carrying. Like, what are you carrying? What is your burden? And what weight does that bring to bear on you, on your own sense of capacity, your own sense of energy, your own sense of positivity? It's vital that we put down our burdens at times. We're not meant to be. Again, you talk about, like, I'm talking about like a natural state. It's not natural to constantly carry. That's not a natural state. There has to be a time when we put down what we're carrying, and we can be free then to pick something else up, or we can be free then to embrace somebody. We can be free to hold ourselves. I like that idea a lot. And we can get very, very caught up in other people's burdens. We can get very caught up in what other people are carrying, particularly if they haven't found a way to put that stuff down. Because that, I think, for some people, what they're carrying ends up completely obscuring their view. And that then becomes a very fraught experience. Because if you're carrying something so big that you can't see what's in front of you, that really is a massive, monstrous existential challenge. Because I think having a sense of space in the future, even if that's unknown, I think it's really important for our mental health and our emotional health to go, there's something beyond this that's wide open for me. And that's a world of, of possibilities. That's a world of yet to be had positive experiences, life affirming, life enriching experiences. Because if I can't see that, it's very hard to feel hopeful. And it's very hard to feel positive about the future. And I know many people operate on the idea of, I know exactly what's in my future and I'm working towards that. So again, we come back to this idea of working towards the goal. I know it's in the future. I'm going to try and, save this money and buy that house. I'm going to go on that holiday. I'm going to purchase that car, or, whatever it might be. And that, of course, can become deferred enjoyment, deferred pleasure. That can be future living. And, or else it can fit into a more balanced frame of, there are small pleasures enjoyed on the way, while compromises are also part of that package. And it's just little by little and slowly and eventually getting to that place. But personally, I'm not a huge fan of that, because I think it brings its own limitation, or its own sort of tethering to something that precludes the idea of openness and precludes the idea of the unknown, which I like. But again, that again fits with my leaning, my inclination. And I know for other people, they want that. They want that concrete thing waiting. They want that clear path towards something. But once again, to see the clear path, the burden has to be put down. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me. And maybe the other logical approach is you have to find a new way of carrying things, so you can see ahead, so you can see the openness, so you can see the air in front of you. I think things need, otherwise things can get very claustrophobic. It's like, I don't know what you, if you're a driver, how do you feel driving behind a truck when you can't see the road in front of you? I can't stand that. I'll be determined to switch lanes, slow down and get some cars between me and the truck just so I can see ahead. I hate being stuck beside a truck so I can't see the road in front of me. I can't stand it. So I don't know what your experience of that is, or your sense of that is, but it's not for me. And that's really what I'm trying to pitch in today's episode, is the idea of the path. What is the clear path? What are you doing to give yourself the best chance of moving through or onto a clear path? And part of my thinking around this area today has a martial arts informed perspective, because I was trying to think of this earlier. I didn't quite get to the point. The idea of challenges and the idea of things that trigger anxiety in us or trigger stress in us, and how we think of those things. And I think many of us, and I'm definitely one of the us that I refer to here, I think many of us have a very strong aversion to the things that cause that response in us, and we want to shut them down, or we want to pretend they don't exist. So it can involve denial, it can involve rejection, it can involve repulsion. And I was trying to reframe it, just looking at my own responses to certain things that are going on in my life. And I was trying to reframe it and go, well, hold on, if this was in a karate setting, if this was in a dojo, and these problems or these challenges, these confronting elements, if they were personified in the body or in the bodies of other karate practitioners, I would regard them with respect. I would regard them head on. I would make eye contact. I would bow. I would set myself for training. I would set myself for controlled conflict. I would set myself for the practice of the art, trusting that I would be a better practitioner on the other side of the experience. So I was trying to think about looking at the things I find challenging in life. I was trying to sort of restructure my thinking and restructure my reaction and do what I've said many times and try to move away from reaction and towards response, where I have more agency and more control. And that line of thinking, immediately, the second I engaged that way of thinking, I felt myself calm down. And then it further led me to pick up a book, and the book is basically a book of karate principles, which were first published in 1938, and these are fundamentally the teachings of the originator of Shotokan karate as it's taught today. And the author and karate practitioner is one of the old great masters of the style of karate that I've done for over 30 years. His name is Gishin Funakoshi. And I picked up this book, and there were a couple of postcards and a couple of photographs inside it, and they were all sort of I kind of took them all to be good omens. There were a couple of photographs of my wife from just before we started seeing each other, looking very happy and very beautiful, and amongst friends in Sydney back at the end of the last century, I guess, or at the very beginning of this century. And then there was a postcard which my wife had sent me very early in our relationship, and it's a Richard Avedon portrait of the Hollywood director John Ford. This great close-up of his craggy face with his eye patch and his glasses. And she just picked it up because she liked the look of the face and thought I'd appreciate it. And on the postcard was wondering whether I knew the subject. Another postcard in the book was a photograph from the Ken Norton Muhammad Ali fight, a heavyweight bout from 1976, and it's shot from sort of beneath the boxer, so you're looking as if you're on the canvas looking up at them trading punches. It's a very evocative, dramatic shot. So that was good straight away, just to kind of pick this book up, which I hadn't looked at for some time, and flick through it. I'm going to end today's episode just by reading a couple of the principles from the book. The book is called The 20 Guiding Principles of Karate, the Spiritual Legacy of the Master. And as I say, the master in question is Gishin Funakoshi. And principle number 1 is one that I'm sure I've spoken about before on the podcast, and it is fundamentally about respect. And the principle is very simply, do not forget that Karate Do begins and ends with Rei. So Karate Do. Karate just means empty hand. Do means the way. So the way of the empty hand. And basically, in this principle, the author says Rei is often defined as respect, but it actually means much more. Rei encompasses both an attitude of respect for others and a sense of self-esteem. When those who honour themselves transfer that feeling of esteem, that is, respect, to others, their action is nothing less than an expression of Rei. And he continues, without Rei there is disorder. And also the difference between men and animals lies in Rei. Combat methods that lack Rei are not martial arts, but merely contemptible violence. Physical power without Rei is no more than brute strength, and for human beings it is without value. And And sorry, I should clarify that rei is a Japanese word. It's spelled, well, translated into English, written R-E-I. Rei is how we demonstrate rei as a physical action. Is we bow. So rei, the command rei, requires us to bow to the people we're training with. But what this principle is laying out is it's much more than just the physical action. And just to underline that, he says, it should also be noted that although a person's deportment may be correct, without a sincere and reverent heart, they do not possess true rei. True rei is the outward expression of a respectful heart. I love that. I think that's a very, very powerful idea, and it speaks to integrity, and it speaks to honesty, and it speaks to sort of selflessness. These are powerful things. So all martial arts begin and end with rei. Unless they are practiced with a feeling of reverence and respect, they are simply forms of violence. For this reason, martial arts must maintain rei from beginning to end. That's principle number 1. So it sets up the whole thing. And it's why the culture of a karate club, the culture of a traditional martial arts club is so important. Because if that overarching principle of respect isn't present in everything that takes place inside the walls of a training hall, inside the walls of a dojo, then what comes out, or what's produced and what's practiced, it's never going to be, it's going to lack integrity. It's not going to be the real thing. And this again comes back to some of my kind of critical responses to mixed martial arts and UFC, because I think some practitioners, that respect in the traditional sense, and in terms of what I just described, it's just not there. It's not palpable. It doesn't inform their practice. Okay, here's another one. I'll do 2 more. This is really nice as well, because this again takes the spiritual side and the philosophical side of karate and tries to point out the importance of applying those principles outside the dojo. So this is principle number 10. Apply the way of karate to all things. Therein lies its beauty. One blow or one kick, given or taken, can mean life or death. This concept forms the soul of Karate-Do. If all aspects of life are approached with this spirit of seriousness, all manner of challenges and hardships can be overcome. When practitioners confront hardships with the attitude that their life is at stake, it will reveal to them what can be accomplished through their own abilities. They will come to see the wonderful power that stems from polishing the mind and body through the way of karate, and will recognize the exquisite beauty of this path. So again, very, very powerful idea. And there are different ways to approach that idea. It doesn't, in my opinion, it's not to look at every day and the challenges of your everyday life and go, the stakes are really high, everything is life and death. But it sort of incorporates the previous principle, this idea of respect, to value your life, to value the quality of your life, to value the quality of your experience, and to value yourself on a day-to-day basis, and to not be complacent. And that really is important. Of course, it's important in a martial sense. Complacency leads to vulnerability, actual physical vulnerability. Complacency can lead to arrogance. And I know, I know, I've had moments of complacency in karate settings over the years, and I've paid the price. That's when you get hit. That's when you get hurt. And that's and that's coming from, not, I wouldn't consider myself arrogant ever, really. And that's not where that complacency came from, but it can still be interpreted that way. So, yeah, really nice. So apply the way of karate to all things, and therein lies its beauty. So it's, I mean, you can probably already get this sense, the kind of the mindfulness of true practice. And I mean, I'm not trying to proselytize here. I'm not saying, hey, go and do karate, because the experience from one karate club to another varies enormously. So much depends on the culture within that particular club, and it can be a very mixed experience. And this is true for all martial arts, in my opinion. But let me conclude today with this this other principle. This is a bit deeper, but there are a couple of nice things in this section. So I'm not going to read it all to you, but the principle is this. This is number 17. Kamae, which is ready stance, is for beginners. Later, one stands in shizentai, natural stance. So at first pass, you're looking at this principle and going, okay, there's a ready stance, so like a beginner's stance in karate, preparing to fight. And later, as one is more experienced, one can stand in natural stance. So this has a lot of deep stuff in it, this section. It's longer than some of the other sections. And really what Funakoshi is saying, that, and this is a sort of a truism of a lot of, I think, traditional martial arts practices, and it applies to a lot of things. When we begin, a lot of the techniques and actions are very external and visible and demonstrated and easy to identify, easy to show. And that, these are sort of the basic building blocks of the technique. But as one gets more experienced, that gets internalized, and the effect of those stances and techniques can be achieved from a much different starting point. And so really it's about internalizing experience and internalizing skill and having the fine-tuning of dedicated practice internalized and ever present. No pressure. So there were a couple of nice things in this section, and these are all, you've got these sort of very classical sort of aphorisms, I suppose is what you'd call them. Do not become distracted by over concern with whether the physical form of your kamae is good or bad. And another one, no matter how impenetrable your ready stance may look, it is of no use if your mind is asleep. That's a particularly tasty one that ticks certain cliched boxes. No matter how full of holes an opponent's kamae may appear, if his mind is prepared, you must be extremely cautious. So appearances aren't everything. Something that appears strong on the outside but that's empty inside has no value. Something that appears to be not so hot on the outside but has real steel inside is very dangerous. In like manner, it is also a major error to become caught up in the concept of kamae of the mind, readiness of the mind. As an old song cautions, it is the very mind itself that leads the mind astray. Of the mind, do not be mindless. I love that. It's the mind itself that leads the mind astray. Of the mind, do not be mindless. So that's just layer upon layer of mindfulness. But don't delude yourself. Don't trick yourself. In other words, this is from the book. In other words, we must always be on guard against ourselves. So really, really, really nice. And there was another lovely one in this same section, which is trying to epitomize this idea of effortless mindfulness and effortlessly mindful reaction to danger or reaction to an attack. And it quotes this poem. Let me see what it says here. Watching a karate expert's remarkable ability to respond instantaneously will make the concept of there is no kami, and again, that idea that there's no external obvious state of readiness, it'll make the concept of there is no kami crystal clear. Observing an expert will reveal the existence of an exquisite skill that manifests itself naturally according to the needs of the situation. The power of the expert with no kami is echoed in this old poem that shows how, in the instant the moon appears from behind the clouds, its reflection already sits upon the water. Its waters never intending to reflect. The moon itself never meaning to be reflected. The pond of Hirasawa. Now, I counted the syllables. It's not a haiku, but it's got a haiku vibe to it. Once again, its waters never intending to reflect. The moon itself never meaning to be reflected. The pond of Hirasawa. So, I think that image of the pond, the still water that reflects, the moon that is reflected in the pond, there's a natural state and a natural symmetry, harmony and reflection. And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to drive at in what I'm talking about today, and in a lot of the stuff I talk about on the podcast. This is the state we want to be in, the natural state, and the response that comes from naturalness, the response that comes from rightness. And again, a quote from this section, quoting an Okinawan scholar sage, described this state of no kami. My mind, calm and clear, like water without ripples bearing a reflection. So that's where I think we'll lead it. That's where I think we'll leave it today. Clarity of mind, clarity of intention, clarity of purpose, clarity of state, the natural state. I mean, I just think that's, to me, that's a great aspiration, something to be desired, something that will be rewarding and self-sustaining and nourishing, but not something that can be done casually or without work. It takes effort. And so come back to that idea of putting down your burden and bringing your mind to that state of calmness, that state of stillness, and internalizing and sort of communicating with yourself and making yourself still like water. Okay, that's what I'm advocating today. I don't know if this podcast was still like water, and I don't know how much traffic you heard as you listened, but as I said, there were a few bum rumblers as some bigger vehicles passed by mere feet from where I sit. Thank you for listening. As always, you can find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook. Apparently the podcast platform I use, Acast, is going to stop putting the podcast up on YouTube. Something to do with monetization and YouTube not giving Acast podcasts or Acast podcasters favourable terms. So just keep an eye on that space. I'm not sure how much longer the pod will go there. But otherwise, you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'd welcome your ears. I'd welcome reviews, comments. You can email me if no one ever emails. One person emailed once. You can email me at theclearoutlive@gmail.com if you have any thoughts, suggestions, reactions, whatever. And if you really dig what I do here at hashtag Secret Garden, that's yet to be decided. You can use the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/the ClearOut, and you can support me with a few dollars, a few euros, a few yen, a few British pounds, and that would be lovely. But if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Okay, I'm gone. Stay well, stay calm, stay focused. Put down. What's the quote from Richard III? Set down your honourable load. Referring to the body that's been carried by soldiers. I'm gone. No more Shakespeare. I'll be back next week with something else. Mind yourselves. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. All the best. Take care. Bye.